Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another Sex Coach U Presents. Today is January 22, 2025. So welcome in. We are here. I have opened the chat to you all. Please feel free to let us know that you are here. Say hi, say where you're from, and toggle that switch from host panelists to everyone. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Amanda. I am happy to be here today for our guest.
Hello, Catherine. My name is Amanda V. My pronouns are she, her. I am located outside of Calabasas in Southern California. I am fine. Thank you for that thought. And I am the coaching skills coordinator. And I want to welcome you, Jordan. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Jordan Vecchio. My pronouns, are she, her. I am located just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and I am the coordinator of the BOSS program here at Sex Coach U, and I am also a student advisor.
Awesome. We are here to chat with Michelle Renee. So I am going to read Michelle's bio while everybody kind of comes in and introduces themselves in the chat. It's so nice to see everybody. Michelle Renee is a Platonic intimacy guide and surrogate partner based in San Diego, California. She specializes in relational-based touch to facilitate emotionally corrective experiences for trauma survivors, particularly those with a history of childhood sexual assault. As a leader in the field, Michelle serves as, and here's a bunch of things, so get ready, co-chair of ASEX Somatic Sexuality Professional Special Interest Group. Already I have questions. Co-founder of Embrace, a nonprofit resource group for surrogate partners, and co-owner of thecuddleist.com, as well as host of the podcast, The Intimacy Lab. I've got so many questions. I'm sure you do too. Michelle's passion lies in supporting trauma survivors to establish safety within themselves and others through therapeutic love. And you can learn more about her work at humanconnectioncoach.com. Welcome, Michelle, to our webinar.
That was really great. I'm going to try not to double up on some of that introduction as I talk today. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as I understand it, your presentation today is without a slide deck. So Jordan and I are going to stay on camera as much as we can, and we will be reading the chat as questions come in for you. Does that work?
I love it. I'd rather talk to people and not myself. So that's kind of
awesome. Yeah. So chat, for those of you who have questions as Michelle progresses through her presentation, feel free to put those questions in the chat, but there will be a Q&A at the end if you have questions that Michelle doesn't necessarily hit on like specifically. So your more random questions, we're going to save toward the end. But if you have a question real time, feel free to put them in the chat, and Jordan and I will share them with Michelle.
Thanks. Shall I get started?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I want to start with a quote from a client that I'm going to share her story with you all today. And it is, woke up during the night saying over and over, she held me, she didn't hurt me, she touched me, and it felt nice, not scary. This is a client that I've been working with for about a year and a half, and that's what we're going to talk about today is our journey together, but also what got her to this point and how different touch modalities that I use have come into play with our work together. So in setting this container, I want to talk about, content warning. Childhood sexual assault is not a fun topic. It could be triggering for some people. Please take care of yourself. I'm going to try not to sensationalize any of it, but it's also like the facts are the facts, and I don't want to minimize her experience, and I do have her utmost support in talking about our work together. She's a big proponent of sharing her story. So I want everybody here to take a little bit of comfort in that. I'm probably going to use some language. I love dropping a good F-bomb here and there, but who knows what else is going to come out of my mouth. This is real casual. I could talk about my work without this outline that's sitting to the side of me probably for 3 or 4 hours and not get tired of it. So we can make this work inside this little time span, but I've got a lot of flexibility as far as how much time we use for questions. My ask of you for your responsibilities is to come with curiosity. This can feel edgy, and it is edgy. Let's just sit with that today and just be open-minded, ask curious questions, notice how you're feeling in your body, take good care of yourself during this time, and know that I absolutely love this work. And even though I work with really dark topics, I get to work on the lighter side of those dark topics. So I'm happy to be here. So a little bit more about me, besides the introduction that Amanda so lovely, whatever. What you shared was what I probably wrote up at some point. But I want to say I'm a 49-year-old sex-favorable asexual, neurospicy queer cis woman with a personal history in non-monogamy and BDSM, as well as 2 decades of sexual coercion as part of an emotionally abusive marriage. So part of my work has been work on myself, but it also shows up as what can be possible on the other side of doing this work. I have 2 adult sons who I have a great relationship with. They know everything about my work. I don't have to hide anything about what I do with them. And many thanks to finding Cuddlist in 2015 after my divorce, we have a really wonderful relationship. I can't say that would have necessarily been the case if I didn't go through a bit of emotional maturing. If anybody likes the book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, I was an emotionally immature parent.
We love books here. We love books.
I love books too. Just a little bit of modification. In November, I actually decided to not call myself a surrogate partner anymore, though my work is still the same, and we're going to talk about that today. Because I work in the Platonic sphere, surrogate partner therapy, the phrase, it gets really confusing for people because of its history, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so first we should probably talk about what are the 2 modalities I'm going to primarily speak about, and one is cuddle therapy, and the other one being surrogate partner therapy. Cuddle therapy, pretty new as a professional modality that we've been cuddling for generations and generations and generations. I got started with Cuddlist.com in 2015, right after they launched, and they were an attempt to help make the professional cuddling world a little bit safer. There were some pretty predatory websites on the web at that time that were sending profiles off to fetish websites and pulling clients from lots of different places. And the co-founder of Cuddlist really wanted to help train those practitioners to be able to be a little safer in the work that they were doing. The company that she was listed with was not interested in letting her do that. And so she created Cuddlist.com, which is a training platform for cuddle therapy. Cuddle therapy from Cuddlist always has 3 components. It always has a code of conduct, which is found on our website. It includes things like we stay clothed, we don't pursue arousal, you have to be able to consent. So no, you can't be taking anything that would inhibit your consent. You have to be 18, things like that. We also have an opening agreement that kind of helps build real connection, like authentic connection, in that we promise each other we're never going to do anything that we're uncomfortable with. And if we find ourselves in a place of discomfort, we promise the other that we're going to change something about that. So a client, the third component I'll say is it's always client-led. So the client is encouraged to learn how to ask for what they want. And as a practitioner, I am mandated to only say yes to the things that I'm a wholehearted yes to. So it's a great opportunity for clients to identify their wants, but also to hear a no once in a while and process the feelings of that it's not about me rejecting them. It's that I am practicing good self-care and that I'm not going to do anything that I don't want to do. That's kind of the gist of cuddle therapy. Of course, it includes the potential for touch, but because I get to say no to anything I'm not a yes to, that touch is just an option. And sometimes clients come in and they never want touch. So it's really just a space for connection. Surrogate partner therapy, on the other hand, is what I would call, it's kind of like cuddle therapy on steroids, in that that code of conduct is blown out of the water, right? We suddenly have a whole nother set of boundaries that we need to stick with, but they're very, very different. So surrogate partner therapy used to be commonly known as sex surrogacy. It was started with Masters and Johnson in like the late 60s, early 70s. And back then, it was used primarily to work around sexual dysfunction. So erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation. Couples would come work with Masters and Johnson for a week or two and learn sensate focus exercises, work on whatever was happening in the bedroom for them. And when a single man showed up and didn't have a partner, we brought in another person, which was probably a sex worker at the time, to serve as their partner to go through these exercises. Fast forward, and in this current day and age, the industry doesn't, most of the industry, of course, there's always going to be the outliers. People that I'm connected with, we don't like to use the term sex surrogate anymore. The work is really more about relational skill building. Many of my colleagues make sexual contact a possibility as part of the work, though it's never guaranteed. It's always done in what we call the triadic model, which means that there's always some kind of clinician, therapist, coach, somebody that's on the outside of that relationship between the surrogate and the client that can help the client process what's happening in sessions, while also kind of keeping a bird's eye view of what's happening in the dynamic to make sure that everybody is staying in their yes, this is still a good match for the client, there isn't any coercion happening. Also support for the surrogate partner, because here is a mutual client that the two of you, the clinician and the surrogate, know better than anybody else. And to have that support team, it feels amazing and it's so collaborative. So surrogate partner therapy tends to be much more structured than cuddle therapy, in that we kind of have this arc of the work that we're looking at. There always is a goal. Where in cuddle therapy, but there doesn't need to be a goal. Again, we have boundaries in surrogate partner therapy, like we can be naked in surrogate partner therapy. Because there's another party involved, I know for myself, it's a lot easier to go deeper into the mirror. Like I often have a conversation with colleagues about, are you a mirror or a pillow? And in cuddle therapy, most of the time I'm showing up as a pillow. I'm a soft place to land, unconditional positive regard. I'm going to hold whatever is there. I'm not there to necessarily work on anything, right? And in surrogate partner therapy, I start out like a pillow. And as we build trust in our relationship, I get to switch over to more of a mirror, where I get to point out, I'm noticing that, let's just an example. I noticed that when I gave you a no, you pulled away from me. Let's talk about that, right? What will it take to keep you feeling connected to me and safe enough to where you would come back to me? And notice that I'm not going anywhere, because a lot of times that's somebody's avoided attachment showing up, right? And so in cuddle therapy, that might not come up, right? It might not be addressed. It might just be holding space. Where in surrogate partner therapy, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that relationship dynamic. So that's my yes, Amanda.
What you had mentioned that sexual surrogates are kind of leaning away from being, two things. What are sexual surrogates called? And you said that you were kind of leaning away from that. What are you calling yourself now?
Okay. So surrogate partners generally in my world of surrogate partner therapy, we don't like the word sexual surrogate because it sets the client up for a mismatch of expectations compared to what we're actually offering, right? I think there's still sex surrogates in the world. I think it's a great thing to offer in my head, and this is just my definition.
Yeah.
To me, I think of a sex surrogate as maybe more of a compassionate sex worker who will take a client through maybe a series of sessions, but it's not this very measured, slower approach that surrogate partner therapy has. Example, when I worked in the full spectrum of surrogate partner therapy, meaning that I did offer a potential for sexual contact with my clients, that might not happen until we were together for 6 months, 9 months, a year of regular work.
Okay.
Right? When I think of sex surrogacy, if I was going to make up a definition for it, it might be something that happened over a couple of sessions, over, a much shorter period of time, because that's the point of it. Where in surrogate partner therapy, it's more about building relational skills that are stopping single clients from pursuing relationships in the regular world. So they're working with a coach or a therapist, they're really struggling with dating. Otherwise, they would work on what's coming up for them in the therapy with their partner, but they're having a hard time getting a partner. So the surrogate partner comes in, and it might be maybe a delayed sexual debut, right? We know that there's like socially acceptable times to not know what you're doing, right? And so when you don't have that experience, when you're young and everybody expects you to flounder around a little bit, and it's stopping you from dating, that can be a reason to bring in a surrogate partner to kind of teach you those skills that get you to the point of having sexual contact. And maybe you can do that with your surrogate partner if it's deemed therapeutically appropriate, right? And some clients never want to have actual sexual contact with their surrogate partner because they might get to a point where they're like, actually, I don't need this with you. I feel really capable. Other times that I've seen is someone who maybe has discovered a change in their orientation or gender presentation later in life, and they need to learn how to maneuver through the world in that different identity, right? Surrogate partner therapy can be so, so helpful for that.
So what I'm hearing is the difference between sexual surrogacy and surrogate partner therapy. That is the separation, at least as far as semantics are concerned, or labels.
The difference would be how fast the work moves and what the intention is. Like if you're showing up and you're like, I need to practice the sex, that is not surrogate partner therapy.
Got it.
Yeah. I need to learn all the best moves to do the best blowjob ever. That is not surrogate partner therapy, right? And it gets confused all the time. We get confused as like the kind sex workers, right? That we're going to be kinder. I've heard that before. And I'm like, I think a lot of sex workers are plenty kind. Mm-hmm. This isn't the space. Or we get people that are married and they're not having the sexual relationship with their partner, and they think this is the way to get it done in a legal way, because surrogate partner therapy is not illegal anywhere, right? But the reason it's not illegal is A, there's not a direct sale of money for sexual contact. It has to be in triadic model. If it comes into play, it's because everyone decided it's the next best move for the client, and the price doesn't change. There is no, okay, you're going to pay the same no matter how you show up. So if you show up and we're talking about, let's say, wheel of consent practices, right? Mm-hmm. And we're doing waking up the hands or any of the exercises in wheel of consent, it's the same price that day than if we are having penetrative sex.
Got it.
Right? It is not a pay for service situation. And then the other part I heard from your first question was, okay, but what about Michelle and she's not having sex with her clients anymore? I didn't say it that way, but last year I had a mandate for myself to take sex out of my work, to see what would change for myself. I mentioned that I did have a long history of sexual coercion in my first marriage. And what I've realized about myself is I don't trust myself to make that decision of, am I having sex with the client because I want to have sex with the client? Am I having sex with the client because I think it's what the client needs, and I'm a helper at heart? Or am I having sex with the client because the client expects me to? Right? And it was something I was finding that was causing me a lot of I don't want to say distress, but I wanted to try what would it mean to have my work not be valued on the fact that I was having sex with my clients, because I was doing all this really great work and I wasn't finding that the sex was the important component of it. Okay. So I switched last year to what I was calling platonic surrogate partner therapy.
If you see my eyes cast down, it's because I'm taking notes. I just want you to know that I'm not like
no,
somebody.
You're good. You're good.
I want to make sure I take lots of notes here, and if my eyes drop down, I don't want to be misconstrued. Can you repeat that, because now I have lost my train of thought?
So I decided to try something I was calling platonic surrogate partner therapy, meaning I was going to do all the same work. I just had a limit on where I was going to stop my work. Right? What I noticed was that my demographics changed. I rarely have a cis male client. Most of my clients have switched over to being primarily cis women that identify as lesbians, which has really been so cool to witness, because when I first got into touch work, cuddling was very much all male clients. And then eventually I started to get trickles of women coming through. And then now I can say I have all genders coming through, and it's much more balanced, and that's super cool. And to get to work with a different demographic than I had for so many years is really great. And what I'm finding is that I'm working with a lot of childhood sexual assault survivors. So what are the limits to my work now as a platonic surrogate partner therapist? Or what I'm calling myself now is I've just reverted back to human connection coach. It's kind of the umbrella that all of my work falls under. And because I'm not having sex with my client, surrogate partner therapy became almost masochistic of a term to use, because I spent so much time talking about the fact that I wasn't going to have sex with my clients, rather than talking about what I was going to do with my clients. So today we're going to talk about, what do I do with my clients?
Love that.
And what does platonic mean to me? So my rules now are, I love getting naked with clients. I think there's so much to be gained in body image, confidence, just safety, connection. Think about kangaroo care in the ICU.
Yeah.
Right? Skin to skin contact, so healing. Standing in front of a mirror with another naked body and just normalizing what we see. Like, there's so much that can happen there. I'm also okay with genital touch, but I don't come with any sexual energy. I'm not interested in having sexual contact. Right? So I'm going to give an example in this case about how that showed up, so people can kind of visualize it a little bit better when I say that statement. So let me dive in to this wonderful clients of mine. So before I do that, any questions?
We have some.
Okay.
Where do you source the third outside support mediator for surrogate partner therapy?
Yeah. A lot of times the client is the one that reaches out to me, so they may already have a therapist, or if they do have a therapist, they'll go back and talk to their therapist. Most of my clients have been with therapists that have never worked with someone like me before, so that's not unusual or too complicated. We also have a big, robust community of surrogate partners who have worked with different therapists and coaches, and we will send a client inquiry. Oh, you need someone in this state. If you're looking for a licensed therapist, this is somebody that we love working with. They really come in all directions.
And then, thank you so much. Would you ever recommend a coach over a therapist, or is that not something that you?
I don't know that I say over a therapist.
Okay.
I think I have, I don't know that I've actually worked directly with a coach. I have considered it, and it has never panned out. It wasn't because of the coach. I think it depends on the type of case. If it is a pretty, simple is probably not the right word. I don't know if they're ever simple, but if if there doesn't feel like there's a need to have a mental health licensed therapist in the room, if it's a much more simple situation, maybe it's just a delayed sexual experience, that there's not a bunch of trauma in the background, you know what I mean? Like that would totally be doable. And it depends on the coach. We know that there are amazing coaches out there, and we know that there are coaches out there that actually just left their license or put it aside.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's no hard and fast rule on it. If you find somebody you work well with, build that team.
And I think from the coach, from us, we at Sex Coach You, as a coach's perspective, we would like to be able to bring work to surrogate therapy partner or the surrogate partners therapy. So we are kind of hoping to be able to be that third part of the triad.
Absolutely.
Margolshata asks, could feelings come up and how do you counteract this?
Yeah, I want feelings to come up. Like that's where people show up their most authentic selves, and how they're, whatever is coming up for them in the dating world, if those feelings can come up with me, that's fantastic. I'm the boundaried professional in this space though, right? You mentioned in my intro the healing that I think is available in therapeutic love. Whether you're a cuddle client or a surrogate partner client, I love you, right? I'm going to love you as a verb. And for me, I believe that when they come to see me, I want them to know what that feels like, so that when they're out in the regular world, they can recognize that when it's healthy, right? What does healthy communication feel like? What does healthy love feel like? It's not love from the sense of lust. Do you know what I mean? Like separating those two things out, just understanding what it's like to be really cared for and respected. So those feelings that come up, I love them. And that's why the third party is so, I think, helpful and important, because eventually this relationship probably has to end. It depends on how they're coming. If they're coming for cuddle therapy, it doesn't have to end, right? They can keep using me like a massage therapist or their hairdresser or any other professional they have in their life. In surrogate partner therapy, when we hit our goals, it's time to kick birdie out of the nest, right? We got to help them generalize the work so that they can take what they've learned and move it forward. So in those spaces, I say things like, what do you love about me? Let's start that list of characteristics so that you can find those when you're out there looking in the regular world.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah. All right. Client. I'm not going to name her. I'm just going to call her my client. She's a white cis woman in her mid-60s. She was suffering in childhood sexual assault from the hands of her father from the age of at least 4. That's her earliest memory at this point, all the way into her early teens. She has a sister and 2 brothers. All 4 of them were abused by their father. She ended up married, had 2 children, but I can say this, has never had consensual sex. She was in an arranged marriage through a Catholic-based cult that has since been shut down. And they paired her up with a gentleman that disclosed that he was gay, and they told him, love of a good woman will fix that, right? So neither one of them had consensual sex. In fact, I've been told stories about, being a couple months into their marriage and the church directing them that they needed to have sex because they hadn't consummated their marriage yet. Right. So there's a lot there. She was, I don't remember how many years she was married. I want to say it was like 5 to 7. He did come out as gay, and she also came out as a lesbian about 5 years ago. So I guess, at 60, it's not too late. When she first sought support, she had one memory. She remembered crawling into bed with her parents in the middle of the night because she was scared of thunderstorm or something, and her dad inappropriately touching her. That was the only memory she had when she started attending a rape support group. And she was paired up with a wonderful therapist that she is still with. Talk about getting lucky and winning the lotto. She has a really fantastic therapist who does EMDR with her, a lot of internal family systems work, very somatically based. So when they first started working together, they worked on a lot of questioning beliefs, right? She had a lot of beliefs that were really embedded in her from her years in the church. And some of those beliefs showed up when even just the therapist would ask her to place her hand on her heart, to touch herself, even like that. She was like, that's wrong. You're not supposed to touch yourself. Right. So that's the place that she was starting at. I met her a year and a half ago. I believe she started working with her first cuddleist about 2 years ago. So she has a local, she's not local to me in San Diego. She has a local cuddleist in her community that she started working with because she felt touch hunger or skin hunger. And she asked her therapist, like almost in a sense of like shame, like, why do I feel this desire to have touch in my life? And at what must have been, early 60s, you've had this whole life of not having really consensual touch in your life. Like that desire won out even over all those years of abuse. So when I met her, she had been following me on Instagram, social media in general, and she was coming to San Diego. And so she thought, oh, I could have a chance to have a session with Michelle. So she booked a cuddle session. She showed up, I think it was June of 2023, and came in. This is my office here. I have it set up to be trauma informed, so nobody ever has to have their back to the door. Things like that are considered when they come in here. And one of the things that she noticed after that, or in the first session, was that she was sitting with her back to the door, and it shocked her. And it's funny because sometimes I'll hear from clients, they think it's me. They think I'm the reason they're able to do this stuff. And it's like, no, you've been doing so much work that your body trusts you enough to not have your back to the door. That's a huge win. That's a big check mark. And that starts to show up when you show up in restaurants, right? Where do you seat yourself? She's noticed a similar situation where she wasn't making plans in a movie theater to figure out where the exits were, right? She has these things happening in multiple places in her life. And I do really think it's a lot of her work with her talk therapist, but also getting started with the professional cuddling. Another thing that happened after that first session was she was able to sleep on her back for the first time, flat. And people, if you don't have a history of sexual assault, might not put the points together here, but she always had to sleep a little bit elevated so she could scan the room, right? That's what her nervous system needed. And after our first session, she noticed in her hotel room that she was able to sleep flat. Huge change. So we did a couple of those sessions. I travel back to Baltimore, where I spent a couple years working, and so I still have clients there. And so she's on the East Coast, so I traveled back to the East Coast to work, and we had another session. And then she came to me in January of 2024 and said, "Do you think we could move to surrogate partner therapy?" She had her therapist on board with it. We met, did what we call a triadic meeting, which is all three of us together, either in person or on Zoom. Thank God for Zoom. We can do a lot of work from across the country that way. And I remember her therapist saying, "So how do you work, Michelle?" And I got hit with a bunch of imposter syndrome because I was worried wasn't going to have the right answer. Because the truth of the matter is, touch work is really not familiar to the talk therapy world. They are not used to the idea of working collaboratively, and they're not used to the idea of their clients being in a professional touch space. And is that scary? Is my client in danger? How are we going to keep our clients safe? So I just said, I just see what shows up in the room. I don't come in with a plan because I need to know what's happening in the present, not coming in with a prescriptive idea of what the next steps are. And she goes, "Great, that's what I do too." And I'm like, "Woo, we're meant to work together. We're going to be a great team." So the way that this client and her therapist and I work together is different than any other client relationship that I've had thus far, but I'm so open to doing this with other people too. this client is really aware of herself. She's done a ton of work in therapy. She's got great boundaries. She's not like, there's not a tension of like, there's nothing I couldn't say to her therapist with her in the room that I wouldn't say with her therapist with her not in the room. She can really, I'm not coming in with like, I can't believe that they tried this thing with me, or, like she's just a really great client in the sense that she's self-aware. There's not this conflict of somebody who like maybe wants something from me and they're not getting it and they're trying to manipulate me. And there's none of the stuff that is like, how do we strategize this behind the client's back? It's really, really upfront with this client. So we always do a triadic meeting before we get together. And just this last time we were together, we do a triadic meeting afterwards to break down what happened in our time together. Amanda, your eyes kind of, any thoughts? Or Jordan?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just sparked up for me. Is it ever not so upfront with the client?
Absolutely. Yeah. Most of the time, I would never want the client to read my notes, if that says anything, right? I remember one of my early clients, the therapist suggested surrogate partner therapy. I made a lot of assumptions that the therapist knew more than they did. And I made assumptions about their ethical stance on, let's say, notes. And I'm in session 2 with this client, and the client says to me, I realized when I was reading your notes that I never asked you what your pronouns are. And I just went, oh shit, what did I put in my notes? And yes, the therapist literally handed her my notes. So like, and I've had clients where I'm like, I think this person, they keep bringing up, we should just have sex. They can't concentrate. How should we manage that? I've gotten in conflict over suggesting they see a sex worker, these kinds of things. Like, I don't want all of that to be done in front of the client. Some of that needs to be worked out, or I need to strategize with the therapist or the coach. My preference is to work with clients that have a long established relationship with the third person. Because if I can say, this is what I'm noticing, is that something that you've seen them do over the years? Is this a regular occurrence? Especially around, I'm just thinking of one client specifically that was sure that if we just had sex, then he could focus in the session. And I was like, boy, it'd be great if I had access to his regular therapist that I didn't have at the time. I was working with a coach, well, not a coach, but a sexologist that didn't have a long history with the client, and it made it harder for me to do the work. So things, little things that I've learned about myself and what I need in the work. So with this client, it's not been a problem. We break it all down together with the therapist, and it's like team time. Like we see the whole collaboration as just a team, me, the client, the therapist. So it's a little out of the ordinary, but it's working well for us.
Sounds like a delightful way to work.
It's so good. And I don't have to write notes, right? Like I hate writing notes. And if I can just download it with the client and the therapist, it's really good for all of us. So she asked if we could switch to surrogate partner therapy. And we talked about, what does that mean, right? It's a difference in how I show up. I'm not just showing up as cuddly Michelle. We're going to press on some hard points. I'm going to keep it client-led, but I'm also going to show up more. I get more ideas. Like, I trust my intuition, and when things pop up, I'm not going to say we should do this because it popped into my mind, but I'm going to say, hey, this thought keeps coming up for me. Let me just share it with you, and you tell me what you think. Right. And then we collaborate together, and she does the same thing. She'll say, I keep getting this idea. It seems like a silly thing, but can I just say it? I'm like, yeah, say it. And then we try it. Because here's the thing. Her body is so much wiser than anybody else in the room. Right. And when she's done the work to be able to trust that gut, I want to know what it is. Right. And I'm going to show you a few examples. I know we're getting close on time here. And so I'm going to rapid fire some of the highlights of what we've done together. Mind you, she has a background doing cuddle therapy. She knows her yeses and her nos. She can feel her body. She's very She's done a lot of somatic work that she's not numb anywhere. And that's a lot of the early work that we do in surrogate partner therapy, is to kind of bring the body back online. We've got to go off like in a running start with her because her therapist had done a lot of that work with her inside of talk therapy. So, interesting thing, she has a really hard time showering. It's most of her abuse happened in the bathtub. So the bathroom is especially difficult for her. So one of the first things we did was we got naked together. That was a huge experience for her. She'd never seen another naked woman before. It was huge for her to even touch my back. She's like, I can't believe I'm touching a naked woman's back. Like, it was mind-blowing for her. But what was really interesting that day is that we were in her hotel room and we kept walking in and out of the bathroom together, naked, and letting that feeling hit her until it was neutralized, right? That she wasn't getting activated, crossing that threshold with me, right? And then we stood in the shower together. We didn't turn the shower on because who wants to stand in a shower and then have to get cold and all that stuff, right? But we can still do the work by standing in the shower and letting her nervous system relax into mine, right?
I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
What does that look like when
Yeah.
you are letting their nervous system regulate?
Yeah.
Is
So that happens.
breathing? Yeah, I'm
It happens in cuddle therapy, just like it happens in surrogate partner therapy. It happens from touch, right? It happens from attunement. It happens just from being in space together, right? My nervous system is pretty, it's been exercised a lot in this work. And in fact, if you know Deb Dana from Polyvagal World, we shared a hug at a recent conference and she goes, oh, you're really good at this. And I said, I hear I have a good nervous system. She goes, you do have a good nervous system, right? I'm like, I'll put that on my resume. Deb Dana says, I've got a great nervous system. So we're together. A lot of times, like for standing in the shower, I'm probably hugging on you. We just did it again in a session the other day where I held her. She wanted me to hold her head. She had this young memory coming up of being lifted out of the tub, not having her head supported. So who knows how young this memory was, and her father's finger inside of her. That was the memory she kept having. And she said, as a child, she was worried her head would fall off. That's exactly how she worded it. She asked me, and this was one of those silly questions. She goes, I have this silly thought. Would you hold your hands on my head? And so we did that first, standing outside the bathroom. But then I said, let's take it in the bathroom, right? So we stood back in the shower, different hotel, whole another year later. And I held her head in my hands and she cried. And then she said, and I thought, I had an intuition, I wonder if I should put my hand on her vulva while I'm doing this. And I thought it might be too much. I'm big on letting the client lead at the pace that they're comfortable with, because what I know is that our brains will not lead us to a place that we're not ready for. Right? So if it's keeping it client led, that means that they're ready for it. So I kind of held that one back because I thought it might be a little too much. She goes, could you take one of your hands and just start moving it around my body? And I said, okay, I had an idea, but I put it away. Would it be okay with you if I put my hand, just cupped it on the outside of your vulva? And she said, yes. And I did that. And she just broke down bawling. And I held her there while she bawled until she stopped bawling. Right? And then we made a plan to step out of the tub. I said, I have an idea. Why don't we, after we step out of the tub, why don't we turn it on and wash all this shit down the drain? Right? And I said, and just to be careful, just to be sure, I'm going to go flush the toilet and run the sink water too, just overflow the system. Right? Let's just push all of this out of here. Right? But that's the stuff we're doing in session, is taking these memories, and what she calls it is giving it a new co-host. So it might mean me laying my body on top of hers and that compression. And now when she looks up, she sees my smiling face and not her father's face, right? We're doing just a lot of exposure therapy, but from a space of not recreating it, but giving a new story that's kind of similar, that she can co-regulate with even when I'm not with her. right?
It sounds like this is very coactive. I'm curious what the percentage is of it being client-led and their idea versus you using your intuition and offering without the expectation of acceptance or consent. But like, I would imagine that so many of your clients that you're walking that razor's edge of, if I offer, they may just say yes because that's the dynamic that they live in, versus are they even aware that maybe this exercise could help them, but they haven't thought about it yet because you have that tool.
Yeah.
So how do you walk that line?
It's a building block situation. So that is why we don't in surrogate partner therapy, this is why it takes so long to get to might have sexual contact, right? Is because we have to make sure that we've built this foundation of communication and that I can trust their no.
Okay.
Right? Because I can't offer them anything until I know that they can tell me no. So that is the long process. Right? And that's where in cuddle therapy, we don't make offers at all. Right? It's all, what would you like? I don't know. Okay, well, let me help you find that out. Do you want to be held or do you want to hold? Does that look like laying down? Does it look like standing up? Does it look like next to each other? Like we can coach them in helping them identify those things. In surrogate partner therapy, it is definitely a line that moves over the course of time. With this client, I would say, because she's so attuned and so like she trusts herself so much, we're probably 75% her leading it.
Cool. Wow.
Because we sit down, what are we going to do today? Right? I don't come in again with like an agenda. It's what's alive.
But she hasn't necessarily always been that way, from what I understand, because she's done so much work over the years that a new client knew. It's the building of the relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
My longest client in surrogate partner therapy, when I was doing the more traditional model of it, I saw him for 2 years.
Okay.
And it was a year of sexual contact. Like we had a year of none and then a year of.
Okay.
So yeah, it really varies. And then I have cuddle clients I've seen for 5 years, right? But it's part of their self-care plan, you know? So it's an interesting spectrum of work.
You have a question from Jennifer. I thought ASECT was anti-touch. How do you work with them and stay in alignment with their guidelines?
Yeah, I am a supporting member. I am not a certified member. I know they are working on new ethics guidelines to help people. Maybe I'm hoping the eventualness is, you know, what hat are you wearing? You know, if you're a licensed sex therapist, then please don't touch those clients, right? But if you're also like, okay, example, we have a surrogate partner. We have a few surrogate partners that are licensed clinicians, LCSWs or whatnot. Also surrogate partners. Never with the same clients are they doing the therapy and the surrogate partner work, right? But they're really great to use as the clinician on a case because they know the work inside out and backwards, right? But I don't know if any of them are ASEC certified because of that rule. And maybe if the rule changes, then they could have ASEC certification for sex therapy. For me, I don't have a desire to be ASEC certified. I'm happy being a supportive member, running the somatic sexuality professionals special interest group. We have a seat at the table. It's shifting in the last few years to bring us to the table because we've been a little bit of an outcast for a while. And we just, in that space, we get a lot of therapists that are asking, like, how do we work with you guys?
Love that.
Yeah.
Cindy has another question from a business and marketing view. What obstacles have you faced? You mentioned Instagram. Have you had any censorship issues? So there's two questions. What obstacles have you faced? And have you had censorship? I can't say that word on social media.
I think my biggest obstacle is like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So when I was offering the sexual component to my work, it was, oh my God, you have sex with your clients? right? That was the big taboo thing. And then I took sex off the table, and then it was like, but how are you going to help my client?
Sorry.
So no, I mean,
yeah,
right?
that's
That's primarily in the sex therapy world. I'm shifting over to working more, working on educating the trauma therapy world, because I went to like Innovations in Psychotherapy in Anaheim in October, trauma therapy conference. I split a table with Cuddleist with my private practice, and we were so popular. And no one ever asked me if I have sex with my clients, because they don't know surrogate partner therapy. They're not, that is a completely foreign phrase for them. And that's when I started to just like question if I would be better suited, because of my style of work, to take that out of my name. And so that was where that decision started to come from. So because I'm not doing anything on the sex side, I haven't dealt with any censorship that I know of. I'm sure it feels like I've been shadow banned at times, like, but I don't know that there's a workaround for any of that, other than go get yourself a podcast, because they aren't doing much about censoring those. Is kind of where I'm at.
good to know.
Yeah.
And then one more question. Tammy Lynn says, how often are check-ins with the client's therapists? So
Yeah.
yeah, how often are your check-ins with the client's therapists?
Yeah. So it depends on the frequency that I'm seeing the client.
And how often is that?
It depends. If they're local, I might see them once a week or twice a month.
Wow.
Once a month, whatever like kind of works for their schedule and my schedule. I think the more consistency is better in some senses, because it helps us really build our connection better. I also see a lot of success in people that I only see quarterly, because they live across the country or something like that, and we do multiple sessions at once. So the general rule is every time they see me, I talk to their therapist. It might be shooting a note to them. It might be jumping on Zoom together. It might be a phone call, like some kind of keeping everybody in the loop. That's the general rule.
Cool. And now you are welcome to continue.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to see when I asked her what was most impactful in our work, sometimes I think it's going to be those times in the shower, the time that I laid on top of her, and and how she's been able to take those moments into her EMDR as resourcing moments, and the fact that there's all these little things that pop up that she's just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm able to do this now. But actually, what she said was that the most impactful thing was that I wanted to hold her, that I didn't find her disgusting. That's the most impactful part of all of that. It's not what I thought it would be. Yeah. It kind of goes back to that first quote, right? I mean, now that you've heard a bit more of her story, I'll say it again. I woke up during the night saying over and over, she held me, she didn't hurt me, she touched me, and it felt nice, not scary. She's super in touch with her many ages of like we have the little one and the 8-year-old and the 12-year-old and the 17-year-old, and sometimes a 30-year-old shows up, right? And I love that work. I want to meet all of them and find a way to relate to every single one of them.
Same.
Yeah. It's the best work. Like I said, it's the light side of the darkness.
I am curious how you got into this, and I don't know if that's part of this presentation.
I didn't spend any time on it, but I have a whole episode of my podcast that's about this. It's like,
Please plug it.
Like episode 3 or something like that, of the Intimacy Lab podcast. But basically, I got out of that unhealthy marriage. He left me. Here's my quick pro tip. How do you get out of a narcissistic relationship? Get them to fall in love with someone else, right? It makes for the best divorce. Like everything was so much easier than it would have ever been if I tried to get out on my own. He fell in love with someone else. I did feel betrayed. I will honestly say that. But I started to work on myself. And at that time, I found Betty Dodson. And I took my ass to New York City and learned to love my whole body, not just my vulva. And I learned to masturbate and I learned to orgasm better. And in that space, I said, I want to do hands-on sex ed. I was a stay-at-home mom with no career when that marriage ended. And I knew there that was where I wanted to go if I could. I ended up at Sex Geek summer camp. I went there trying to figure out what kind of sex educator would I be. I didn't figure it out there. But in conversations with those groups of people is how I found Cuddlist was launching it. They were offering free training at the time if you went to Chicago or New York. And I lived 2 hours from Chicago. So I thought it was a stopover because I was a mom and I could cuddle and it would give me something to do while I figured out what I wanted to do. And what I learned was that I was teaching the foundational skills for good sex and good relationships, which was communication, consent, boundaries. But ultimately I was teaching those to myself because I needed to learn them after that relationship, after the way I grew up. There was nothing in my life that told me that I had bodily autonomy. Right? And now I'm teaching every client that they have bodily autonomy. So I ended up adding surrogate partner therapy when I moved to California. And now at this point, it's like I've come full circle and I'm back to doing the Platonic work where I started because there's so much there. If you've done any Wheel of Consent work, Betty Martin always says you have to learn these things in a Platonic space. You have to learn them there first.
As you've been saying this, that's really landed with me because I had a really I had a very healthy upbringing with touch and consent with my mother and with a lot of the femme energy in my family. We had a lot of nudity, but familial but also platonic, right? So I love the concept of like free mom hugs, which is an organization that I'm a part of, which is like platonic touching in a way that feels supportive to individuals who are deprived of that energy. And I am so like, I want to get into this. How do I get into this? How do our coaches get into this? And I'm and how do we separate? Are we going, if we do want to get into this, which part of the triad would we be?
You're not going to be both of them, right?
No. So what does that mean? I know I just put a lot of questions on you.
If you want to get trained as a surrogate partner because you want a more expanded container of work, I really suggest surrogatepartnercollective.org. They're doing a very community-based training where a lot of surrogates are involved in the training, including myself. For cuddle therapy, I'm clearly biased. I love cuddlist.com. Our method is different than other companies out there in that those 3 components, I don't know if there's another company that requires client-led. They tend to do a more prescriptive model because it feels safer to the practitioner to be like, you're going to move through these different ways of touch. And to me, it feels less safe because I'm never going to get accused of asking my client to do something that they didn't know how to tell me no to, right? I love Cuddlist, absolutely everything about them. We have a training that we run monthly. What was the second part of that question?
How do we as sex coaches separate the triadic model?
Decide what hat you're going to wear. Right? I think it depends. For me, if it was,
is it possible to do both, but not at the same time, I guess?
I coach in my cuddle work. I coach in my surrogate part. It's not surrogate partner therapy unless there is a third person. Do I see people that are not in with a third person? Absolutely. My human connection coach title, I don't require a third party because I'm not having sex with the client. There's not that component that I'm trying to protect myself from legally. I think it's always better when there's a third party involved. I think it supersizes talk therapy or coaching, right? For me, I think if the client came to me through my coaching site, well, I have touch in all of my work, so I can't use myself as an exact example. Let's just say I was Amanda and you have your coaching site, but maybe you're also listed on Cuddlist or something like that. I would give them what they came for, stay in that container. Like if they came to you through the Cuddlist site, you could bring coaching into that, but they already expect to have touch involved, right? I do a lot of conversational work, right? They're talking to me while we're touching. It's such a trusted space that they opened up to me about all sorts of things. I'm so comfortable coaching them around sex and relationships while we're laying there cuddling. right? In my human connection coaching, I allow for nudity. I can't do that through Cuddlist. So if they come through Cuddlist and they get to a point in their work where they're like, Michelle, could we work on like body image issues? I'm like, cool. Yeah, we have a plan in Cuddlist to help practitioners take their client outside of that container so that it's a cover your own ass situation, right? You want to change the rules? Cool. Have them sign this paper and then move them somewhere else, right? Because I think nudity in my work is so important, right? But not most of my colleagues would never do that. It's very going rogue in the cuddle world to do that. But I love it. I think it's super helpful for clients and I'm super comfortable in that space. So I think it's, figuring out your processes to keep those separate when needed.
We've gotten some questions. Sorry, I missed the website. So that's surrogatepartnercollective.org.
Yeah.
And cuddlist.com.
Yes.
Awesome. I also have a nude fitness program for women, and I'm kind of figuring out how to get that out there as a coach, and we do nude fitness first, and then we get dressed and do coaching. So there's sort of a little bit of separation there, but I feel that energy, and I kind of am looking for ways to incorporate my coaching into a more touch accessible, because we at Sex Coach U embrace touch modalities, and even though we don't necessarily teach any. So I love the fact that you're here and able to help our students and grads embrace this other potential track.
It would be interesting to see if you had like a code of ethics or things like that, where you could start to create some structure for people to navigate mixed modalities, or would you prefer in your coaching that people keep them separately? Like coming up with that as an organization, I think could be really good for the community.
Awesome. Yeah. And Jordan has put in cuddlist.com. Michelle, so would you like to offer any Q&A to our students right now, or would you like to continue chatting? We've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I think it'd probably be good to open up the Q&A, and then if we don't necessarily get any questions, we've got a couple more minutes to maybe hit more issues. So friends, questions. You've been so active in the chat. Where is your client now? How is she doing, and what is the status?
Yeah, I just saw her 2 weeks ago in Baltimore. That is where we did the head holding, but we also did some work around, she has a lot of scar tissue in her throat from being forced oral sex when she was young, and it's really bothering her. So we did some work around like, what would it feel like to have my hand close to her throat? What would it look like to have my hand on her throat? How does that feel in her body? And she actually, if you're familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with trauma release exercises, but the body will shake, like animals will shake. We don't do that necessarily so naturally as human beings. And we were able to touch on that, and she started to shake, and we've never had that happen in a session before, and she was very scared. But I have history with it, so I was just like, this is so good. Just let it happen. I was holding her from behind, like mama bear kind of situation where she was sitting in front of me, and I just had my body wrapped around her and let her shake while she moved a lot of that stuff through her. Yeah. She's just fantastic. Like she has had new memories keep showing up in our work, but she doesn't, like, it's not a detriment to her. It's just like a clearinghouse of getting that stuff kind of worked out of her system. A fun, interesting thing that might perk some of your listeners. When she was here in October, she got to meet my husband, which some people are like, that's so taboo, right? Anyways, I navigate dual relationships on occasion, and I had an opportunity to have her meet my husband, who she'd heard a lot about, and she was very curious about him. And her little child part got to comment after she left and she gave him a hug goodbye that he was the first man that ever felt warm to her. Right? And I was like, this is great. And we had another session coming up. And I asked her, well, first I asked my husband, hey, what do you think about joining us for like a 30-minute snippet in a 2-hour session where she could get to cuddle with you a little bit? And I wouldn't leave the room, but she never had safe touch from a man before.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm down for it. And he's not been trained or anything like that, but he's lived with me for 9 years. So I think he's been somewhat trained. And I asked her how she'd feel about it. And she was like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. And so he came in and we did our opening agreement, and we had all of our ducks in a row, and they got to cuddle. And we cuddled, all three of us. We cuddled just the two of them. And I stood over them and walked him through an exercise that her and I had been working on, where she was the little spoon, because that brought up a lot of old memories of anal penetration from her father. And we've been working on that. And she asked if they could do the same thing. So I literally stood above them and I said, okay, my husband's name is Paul. Paul, put your hand on her shoulder, not having their bodies touch, but put your hand. How does that feel? Okay, that feels okay. Okay, try putting your hand on her hip. How does that feel? It feels okay. Okay, try putting your hand on her stomach. How does that feel? It feels okay. Okay, are you ready for him to move his body closer to you? Yeah, so we titrated this contact, and she got to share with him her memory, and they both cried together. And it was just one of my favorite things. And I said after that, I said, so do you want to go get trained? And he goes, no. Like, I'm happy to be your tool, right? But he could feel how intense it is in that space, because we're watching the room constantly. Is she dissociating? We're staying attuned all the time, and it's a lot of practice of keeping your attention in the space.
Oh, it's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for giving me a place to share it, because this is the thing, like, you can't understand this just from reading a brochure, or like, it's the stories. And that's, I guess, my recommendation to the people watching this. In your work, it's difficult to tell the stories because of privacy, but if you can find a way to tell the stories, that is how people are going to understand what you do so much better than reading a pamphlet.
The story of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a lot of love in the chat, Michelle. It's been a great, amazing webinar. Great start to the year. It's been very helpful, and I appreciate the clarity and detail of how each differentiate. And thank you for sharing about your client. It was very touching. I could feel the power that this type of support can have. And Travis says, this was excellent. What you provide for people is so full of care and compassion. Love it. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
What would you like to promote before we say goodbye?
I have a whole list of things, right?
Yeah.
Cuddleist, clearly, as a new owner over there, I can't not promote Cuddleist, but they have been life-changing for me. So I just want to say, like, even if it's not something that you want to do as like your main career, the things that you can learn in that space, the training is very much around boundaries and communication, and it can touch a lot of different modalities as far as just the education. The Intimacy Lab podcast is a very casual podcast where I don't have topics. I have people in my world that come on and we answer these questions from We're Not Really Strangers, which is like conversation cards. And so it's very intimate, and we just follow, we chase squirrels, we go down rabbit holes. We never know where it's going to go. And pretty much most of my stuff can be found over at meetmichellerenee.com.
Beautiful.
Oh, Soft Cock Week. Can I throw one more thing in?
Please do.
It's not my baby anymore. I've passed it off to Erica Leroy. But softcockweek.com is a week of soft penis appreciation that we've been doing in November. And you guys might want to people watching this might want to get involved as contributors even. There's podcasts, there's all sorts of cool stuff. This last year we had a soft cock erotica open mic night. It's been really fun to play in that world.
We love Erica Leroy. She came on and promoted Soft Cock Week here in, I want to say October because it was coming up in November. Where can they find your podcast? And just keep saying the name.
Yeah, intimacylabpodcast.com, and it's on all your favorite podcast apps.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Jordan, did you have any further questions?
No, I think I'm all set. Thank you so much for this presentation, Michelle. It was informative and even more heartwarming than I was expecting. So thank you.
It's a tough topic, right? But like seeing the other side of our work.
You delivered it with so much light.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
One of our students says that's the most beautiful and powerful thing I've heard. And thank you for sharing what you do and your clients' stories, what amazing work and the difference you are making. Thank you so much. And from all of us, please go support Michelle and the Cuddlist, perhaps, if that's something that intrigues you. Rate her podcast well. Give lots of give 5 stars. we understand the power of ratings and support. And thank you, Michelle, for coming on. And we'd love to hear from you again.
I would love to come back.
Awesome. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your January, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Bye, y'all.